Right at the beginning of his response, Professor Kessler named 4 important areas for the future. And these I've listed on the slide. And I'll just say a couple of words about each one. But you can find out more about these by just looking them up on Google or Baidu. These are the exact expressions that people use to refer to the 4 ideas, all of which are main topics as we look to the future. The first one is artificial intelligence. This is an area of computer science and engineering that tries to engineer computers to behave like humans within a particular domain. So anytime a computer seems to be doing something that's kind of smart, like returning the right information, answering questions, doing a whole lot of things that you would not expect, there's some form of artificial intelligence involved. This is a very large area and continues to be something that people work on a lot. The second one is virtual reality. That refers to an environment that affects the senses to make a person experience a location or sensation. So a lot of entertainment applications use virtual reality technologies to try to get the person, the user, to feel like they are really in a particular place. The third is big data. This refers to large collections of data that require analysis by computer. The idea is that there's lots and lots of information out there that can be collected and that are collected routinely. But there's so much information that the human eye could not process it and make interpretations from it. And therefore, computer programs are needed to do that. But the term is big data. The fourth one is the Internet of Things. That refers to connecting physical devices like vehicles and buildings over the internet so that you have actual physical things in your space that can be controlled and they can be performed based on the information of what they got online. So these are expressions that you're likely to hear more about and you might want to read more about. They're all really interesting research areas that are starting to have an effect on some of the applications that we actually have access to. And particularly, Professor Kessler talked about some of those. That last question asked Professor Kessler to play the role of a futurist. Futurists make predictions about what is coming in the future based on their examination of current technologies and past practice. So, there's a lot of data that goes into making predictions about what the future holds. The question for us, though, I think is, should English language teachers be futurists? Do we need to think about what's coming in the future? How much should the technologies and the predictions made by other futurists play into our thinking about English language teaching? When I think about English language teachers as futurists, I have to say that maybe we should be futurists to some extent. But at the same time, English language teachers cannot live completely in their imagination of the future. They need to work in the real world by understanding what's possible in their own teaching context. In other words, they need to take a social pragmatist's perspective as well. In the early 2000s, Professor Chappell wrote a book about language learning and technology, and she asked the question about how the English language teacher should position him or herself with respect to the future and the predictions of futurists. In the illustration, we have the English language teacher, and the idea is that the English language teacher might take into account the futurist vision of things to come. Professor Chappell also argued in that book that the English language teacher needs to create somewhat of a balance. The English language teacher can't live totally within the imagination of what's going to come in the future, but he or she also needs to take the pragmatic view of local reality, the actual constraints of everyday teaching in the institution, of the classrooms, and of the students and teachers that are part of the local reality. So let's talk about these perspectives a little bit further to understand the balance. Futurists tend to see the spread of technology as natural and positive. They are real technology supporters. Pragmatists tend to see their local setting as static and determining. So they can be a little on the negative side because of the realities of everyday teaching in an institution. What we really need is just one more perspective to get the balance right. I would suggest that we also need to take into account the critical analyst's view on technology as not neutral. When the English teacher takes on the role of the critical analyst, he or she is in the position to question the assumptions that technology is inevitable, positive, and culturally neutral. Instead, I would argue that teachers should play a role of deciding how and when technology is integrated into learning. Teachers need to evaluate the quality and value of various technologies for their students' learning of English. And teachers need to help students examine how technology supports cultural connections and the spread of culture.